Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. This is AOR, and in today's episode, I'm going to walk you through some of the major improvements in the update week 144 to Icarus. Starting at the very top, in fact, before we even dive in, with the exception of the Artic Vesper, I've got to say, I think the majority of these you'll find are not significant or groundbreaking, but rather just quality of life improvements. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. From the notable improvements, they now have it so that recipes which produce resources, things like your water, your biofuel, and even your electrical charge, rather than just show those things in the recipe, they now will actually tell you how much that resource will be produced in the recipe. And in the tooltip section, where it would show historically the stat count, it's now going to show how much is actually in that container and then its total capacity. And so again, I would say that these are like quality of life improvements. One thing I will say is kind of nice and is welcome is for the mount in the tooltip section, you'll no longer see that title that says owned by no one or owned by nobody. But especially when the owner is logged out. So again, pretty small, I would say, but I would say that's a welcome change. I did think that was kind of weird. My buddy would leave the game, he's logged out, but I obviously know this dog is his, and instead it's just wandering around my base saying owned by no one. It's kind of sad. So, yay, they fixed that. One thing I will say that is kind of interesting that I have not seen before is they're removing a recipe, which is the dirt mound, and they say it's because with the introduction of different tiered shovels, it kind of makes it replete and obsolete, so there's no point in having that there. And if you did have that blueprint, like you did, use your tech tree points and buy that blueprint, they're just going to refund that to you. And so if you didn't, obviously this won't affect you, so don't worry about it. But again, quality of life improvement, I think that makes the most sense, especially with the tiered shovels. And I'll get to how or what that affects later in this update. But before I get to that, let's just point out the Artic Vespers. So they've now added this to the Arctic biomes, and they've had like a random generator that will have spawns for these nests. And so the Arctic regions are going to have these Vespers. They say that they fly at low altitudes, roughly about your head height, which makes actually sense. I don't know if you guys have ever lived where there's bats, but having lived on an island where there's tons and tons of fruit bats everywhere, that's exactly where they fly. Like you could sometimes reach up your hand randomly and hit a bat out of the air. It's totally happened. Not to me personally, because I'm not crazy enough to wave my hand in the air while there's bats flying around my head. But someone I know quite well has done that. Moving on, they will basically attack when they perceive that there's a threat that has come too close to their nest. And so I think for those of you who are crazy enough to wander around the Arctic biome, bro, I kind of think the shotgun is going to be the strategy here. Because I don't know how fast they fly yet. I haven't seen it. But I do think that the shotgun is going to be the strategy here. Because I would imagine it's going to be pretty hard to hit with the bow. Unless you hit them on the nest from like pretty far away. Anyway, they've also added this friendly fire capability. They've turned it off. So when these bats are like dive swarming you and attacking you, they actually will be hurting each other. Or so that's how I understand this update. And then the resource that they've added for these Arctic Vespers, or the snow bats, it's a resource called guano, which for those of you who don't know, that is bat poop. And they're saying the reason for that is it's the new mammoth tusk. So if you know how hard it is to make epoxy, you would go out, kill a mammoth, and then you'd have 500 bone powder, and you use that bone powder to make epoxy. And so, like the mammoth tusk, the guano is now a new high volume biofuel recipe. And so I thought that was a wise, kind of clever way to implement new high volume recipes for things that we already use in the game. They've plugged the null sector and how they're obviously revamping these big missions. They want to add more dialogue, more narrative, and obviously make sure that these missions are exactly what this update deserves. And they've even gone so far as to add a link that you can click on to see those updates. Looking at the cart attachments, I thought this was actually smart. And so going back to the shovels thing, the tiered shovels more or less made the cart obsolete, because the cart was, its function at least, was to make dirt mounds. Like, they produce dirt mounds that you can then use for crafting. But they've admitted that now that they have these tiered shovels, they'll have to go back and revisit what the farming carts can do and how they will be updated, because again, they've kind of made this cart obsolete. But now they want to add different attachments that can be socketed into the farming cart to improve the quality of dirt that they produce. So I think this is a smart thing, though. I wonder sometimes if the developers are making more work for themselves. Obviously, I think some of these improvements need to happen, but then with the example of the tiered shovels and the carts, yeah, I kind of wonder if they're not just making more work for themselves sometimes. Especially with something that doesn't seem like too significant. Like, I don't know anyone who's like holding their breath like, oh man, I sure would like a better tiered shovel for better quality of dirt. Maybe that's you, and if so, like, obviously we're all happy for you. You've got tiered dirt now. Moving on to the new content, just a brief recap. Artic Vesper, they've added new resources like guano. They have a new trophy vestige, and icons for those recipes, so that's neat. I thought it was strange that they decided to lower the texture for the bat. Instead of 4K now, I think it's just a lower texture, so it looks better on screen. I don't think that's a bad thing by any means. I actually think that's a smart decision to make. It means your game will run smoother, and it also look better. And again, they've disabled that friendly fire for the bats. So I think that means that when they are dive swarming you and attacking you, they'll actually be hurting each other in the process. But besides that, I mean, there's things that they've fixed this week, and it's a pretty long list. I don't think it's necessary to read this to you. I mean, some of these things I didn't even know they were a problem. So in that same token, though, I think hats off to the developers, round of applause, because again, this is the reason we love this game, right? The developers are taking something that we already have, and they're working every week to improve that experience for us. And that's the thing that keeps us coming back. That's why we enjoy playing the game. That's why we appreciate the developers, not just bringing us new content, but making the product they already have for us even better. With that, guys, that's going to wrap up today's episode. I hope that you appreciated this. If you made it this far, I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you. I make this for you guys. Whether or not you watch it, that's up to you. Until next time, enjoy your week, enjoy your update, and have fun playing Icarus. Mwah.